In 2021, a British study discovered that between 1998 and 2018, there was an increase of 787% in diagnosis of autism. If the statistics keep rising like this, autism, which is estimated at 1 in every 1,000 people in 1995, will become 1 in every 10 people by before 2030. How crazy is that? Autism, according to the Wikipedia page, is known as ASD, or Autism Spectrum Disorder. It was originally described by Eugene Bloyer, a psychoanalyst, in 1911 as an infant form of schizophrenia, another term which he himself also created. In the 1930s and the 1940s, autism was divided in two subcategories, known as autism and Asperger's syndrome, a softer variation of the first condition. But as most things today, this term Asperger had to be killed because his inventor, as most Germans between 1930s and the 1940s, was also a Nazi. And because of that, Asperger became also autism, nevertheless. But what are the symptoms of autism exactly? Broadly speaking, these are people with difficulties in social interaction and communication, restricted behaviors and interests. They have problems with learning, with social relationships, and even mental health, apparently. They may have difficulties sustaining eye contact, speaking, controlling their emotions and behaviors, maybe repeating words, and having low to no reciprocation towards social interaction. Just like every man between ages of 1 and 100 years old, right? And by the fact, 3 in every 4 persons diagnosed with autism seem also to be male. Maybe due to that variation hypothesis I talked about on my video on neuroticism. Go check that out. But the problem here is not the problems described, but rather with the apparent increase in labeling people with autism or as autistic, which isn't just a problem in the US, but rather in the whole world, specifically here in Brazil. For example, these graphics I just found on Google Images show the same thing. And then you may ask, where does autism comes from? If so many people are apparently developing this, could it be the vaccines? A new sort of mutation like the X-Men? Could it be genetic, epigenetic, a brain disorder? And the answer is no one really knows. There is no consensus on where or how this autism comes to be. If you live in the US and if you say that aliens will be the cause, you could be even right. After all, it's in your country that they like to appear the most, apparently. Back to the topic, the thing is that autism has many hypotheses. For example, researchers like Giacomo Rizzolatti, who discovered the existence of mirror neurons, a set of neurons in the brain that are responsible for repeating and mirroring the behaviors of another person, either in monkey to another monkey or between humans and other humans. It was hypothesized that the lack of these mirroring neurons or the firing of them would be related to autism. But two other research in 2010 and 2022 did not support these connections, with the first one concluding that our study clearly challenges the broken mirror theory of autism. The functioning of mirror neurons systems might be preserved in individuals with ASD to a certain degree. The mu suppression over the sensory motor cortex was significantly affected by experimental conditions. That is, the environment these scientists set up the test was more significant to the suppression of the brain activity than a natural and biological cause. Therefore, the environment they were living was more correlated to the specific behaviors rather than activity, a natural and biological and innate activity of their brain, which is very interesting. Now, another common correlation autism receives is also with low IQ, with a study saying how 10 to 33% of adults with ASD do not use more than simple words and phrases of a child with 2 to 3 years old, which is, in a sense, the biggest characteristic and reason for receiving an autism diagnosis. You have problems in socialization. But if you have low scores in intelligence and is not able to understand what other people say because of a genetic component like intelligence, after all, intelligence is highly heritable, just like autism is associated with high heritability. Could it be that your social problems are not social, but rather due to a biological component? You struggle to understand verbal communication and therefore struggle to create verbal output, not because of the mysterious gods of autism, but because you are, due to lower scores or levels in IQ and intelligence, unable to do so. You are biologically and genetically restricted. I like the comparison that IQ is not a marathon in which everyone runs at some point and everyone wins, but rather that it is more like a pole vault, in which no matter how much you train, there's a limit in which you just cannot reach, and you will never pass that. Another metaphor for intelligence that I like is that of the grass. Imagine that this is what a person with regular scores of intelligence sees in the world. The grass is in a good resolution to be seen. You have plenty of green and pointy blades. But then we get a person with 99 percentiles of IQ. And this is what that person sees. Even though it is in a higher frame, this person could also lack most of the details that are lost in this bigger view. It's like your very intelligent friend who's doing math tests with you, but then you realize that all he does is just to put the results, because the calculus of the equations are being done in his head, and he's doing it so fast that there is no need for him to write it down. All he needs is to write the answers. And the same goes for verbal communication. These people may be doing so fast verbal and word equations in their own heads, and dialogues, potential dialogues, and so on, that they may lack to give proper answers to more mundane or ordinary things in a day-to-day basis. For looking upon things in this higher resolution, these are people that may lack the more pragmatical and practical attitudes of those with lower percentiles of intelligence. And then we come to those with intelligence below average. All they see is just this specific piece of grass, and they can see it with so much detail that they may look as an expert of this specific thing in this specific frame of reference, which is actually one of the common symptoms of autism as well. These people who have so much restricted interests and perceptions of things may be seen as know-it-all about a specific topic. But when it comes to other topics, they lack specifically that which defines intelligence, that is, these universal or general quotes, or G factor, which is the ability to solve problems in general, or as I prefer, as in a fluid intelligence. Fluid intelligence is the capacity to learn how to solve problems instead of the previous knowledge of one's to have to how to solve them. People with high IQ are created because of that. But at the same time, as this guy puts it, people with lower percentiles of IQ can outperform those with higher percentiles due to the better accommodation to regular jobs. For example, if you are looking just at a specific piece of grass, you end up knowing everything about it, and it will be easier for you to keep working on that specific field, on that specific grass, instead of analyzing the whole field, right? While a person with an average IQ can just say, well, it is boring, right? But I can't do that. A person with higher IQ can say, this is boring, and I can just do 1,000 of other things rather than that specific one, and then have no jobs and stay at home living with their mothers until they are 40. Yes, I'm talking about you, Lucas. Just get a job. But at the same time, a person with below average IQ can have the same problems, because it can also be so hard for them to learn anything new that they can find difficult, not only to find a job, but also to work on it as well after they have discovered it. The point here is this: there is an incongruency in many people who say they have high IQs and also autism. Like people who are in the universities with master's degrees and PhDs, and at the same time saying that they have autism. Like Elon Musk, even though he definitely has some problems with communication and relationships, especially in his personal life, it's kind of hard believing he could be autistic once autism is related to having low IQ and their problems of communication being due to that. See how it doesn't make any sense? But well, nevertheless, this is what people say they have. More specifically, this is what psychiatrists say their patients have. And personally, I have a theory for autism myself, which is this. I see that we can categorize autism in 3 different levels. And no, it's not that bullshit for low or high autism. I mean, it's more like on the causes of autism, which could be first, biological and genetic, like that one we have just seen with IQ. 2, a social and environmental cause. For example, people who are not socialized during their infancy can have problems socializing throughout their life. After all, having social abilities, believe it or not, depends on socialization. And many parents and adults and psychiatrists or psychologists seem to forget about that. After all, how will you develop yourself socially if you spend the first 4 years of your life and every hour in your home talking with no one else than your mother? Having problems of communication is not a result of that. It is a necessity. It could be no other way. The super protective mothers who never let their children socialize and feel the stress, and then they become narcissistic adults who try to look for explanations on why they are too sensible due to never experiencing frustration. They are the ones who use headphones to tap their ears from noises and other people. Not because noise and other people's voices are too unpleasant for them, but because of a lack of repertoire. They associate the discomfort of not having proper social abilities due to not developing them by socializing, that they reinforces behavior of avoiding socialization and therefore never have to hear literally things they disagree upon. They can live in their own narcissistic world, which is actually one of Sigmund Freud's ideas on autism in his book on narcissism. He compares between Bloyer's terms and what Freud himself calls narcissism. The child shall have a better time than his parents. He shall not be subject to the necessities which they have recognized as a paramount in life: illness, death, renunciation of enjoyment, restrictions on his own will shall not touch him. The laws of nature and of society shall be abrogated in his favor. He shall once more really be the center and the core of creation, His Majesty the baby, as we once fancied ourselves. The child shall fulfill those wishful dreams of the parents which they never carried out. The boy shall become a great man and a hero in his father's place, and the girl shall marry a prince as a tardy compensation for her mother. The most difficult touchy point in narcissistic system, the immortality of the ego, which is so hard pressed by reality. Security is achieved by taking refuge in the child. Parental love, which is moving and at the bottom of childish, is nothing but the parent's narcissism born again. What I'm trying to say here is everything that we have already told in this specific research, which is the environmental implications for developing or having autism. It is to say how much this environmental disposition is, therefore, related to the parental care to their child, which would then need a differentiation between a genetic predisposition to autism and this more cultural and environmental, so to speak, disposition for autism. If you have a cause which is biological and genetic, you certainly cannot make it and call it the same as having an environmental and cultural disposition. After all, if your disposition is biological, inherited, and genetic, there is probably a not very good prognostic for you and for the things you can do, differently from those which were acquired by your environment, by your development, and by just a lack of socialization. It is not inherited in you. It is just not properly developed, and nothing holds you to develop it later in life. But this will be more of a topic to another video. So dealing with people is certainly not easy. But avoiding to take the responsibility for your life and for your social relationships and your social skills is certainly not better. As Freud himself puts it, sometimes a person needs to be castrated from his parental relationship so he or she can develop herself better. Now, the third theory on the cause of autism is actually not on the people, but rather on those who diagnose autism, that is, the psychologists and the psychiatrists, who in a very competitive society have to capture new clients. The parents who avoid taking blame for being a bad parents or overprotective and not having their own personal lives, and the child who just has no idea on what is happening and just goes with the flow. And then, just like Lego pieces, all of this just clicks. These professionals who should know better and take mental health as an industry to make easy money without caring much on the true diagnosis of that, with the parents that can live in relief, knowing that they don't need to either give proper attention to their child's needs, that is, to leave their homes and start making friends by themselves, and just hearing what they think their child needs, which is, well, just to be suffocated with this love and never to develop themselves properly by themselves. And maybe the child as well, who just have to live in this paradise that's set up by his parents and never have to develop himself or to go after those things he or she really wants in her life. Everything is just put in front of them by their parents. And the child, well, if it is a girl, it now has an excuse to why boys don't hit on her. And if it is a boy, it now has an excuse on why he doesn't have to train his body to get a job and to hook up with these girls. They just lost this archetype. Now, just to finish this discussion on the professionals, I also want to comment on one of the so-called gold standards for dealing with autism. The Applied Behavioral Analysis, also known as ABA, an intervention based upon respondent and operant conditioning, like those models used by B.F. Skinner and Pavlov, to make pigeons to play ping pong after receiving a reward, dogs to salivate when they hear a bell, or rats to push a bar once they want to get a piece of food. And in this case, ABA is also a methodology, not a band, that is also used with children, not adults with autism. And the main focus is this: to stimulate the child behaviors to behaviors that parents would like their children to have. So the child never develops herself by herself. It is also being conditioned by what the parents and whoever is doing this methodology then wants them to have, and then giving them a reward towards it. At the beginning, you can say, well, that seems fine, right? My parents did that too. How can that be a bad thing? Well, the problem appears more in the recent years, when psychologists try to make this a full methodology to treat any sort of autism or just autistic signs, and considering that it is not only technology and TV shows that the US exports for international countries or countries outside itself, children from all around the world were subjected to this method of treatment. Most of the manuals of ABA, the method, not banned, stipulate that these children need at least 40 hours a week of implemented intervention in them. Then imagine just being 6 to 8 hours a day, doing nothing but having an adult telling you what to do and rewarding yourself for that specific behavior. You never have an opinion. You never have your own motivations. You never get to express yourself and to develop literally the social skills or the cognitive functions or the capacity to solve problems and to just express yourself by yourself, to really tell what your needs are instead of just having this adult inputting and what they believe it will be better for you. So isn't that one of the main criticisms of Clockwork Orange? And imagine that film being made for almost 60 years ago and people still repeating the same mistakes today. Not only that, but in Brazil, the NETS, or Núcleo de Avaliação e Tecnologias em Saúde do Hospital Sírio-Libanês, classified this method as very low in efficiency, revealing fragilities in its methodology and studies that proved its efficacy. Well, you know, with low quality evidence that limits its capacity to being recommended as therapeutic approach for people at the ASD, Autism Spectrum Disorder. And on top of that, they also reported that 46% of the children submitted to intensive ABA treatments attended to most of the criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, stating the necessity to reevaluate this intervention as potentially prejudicial. Plus, the report also states the very elevated financial cost of this intervention, saying that in Brazil it can go up to 7,000 reais a month, which costs almost 5 times more than the minimum wage of 1,412 reais a month in the country, which in dollars will be something like $224 for the minimum wage and $1,112 for the intervention as in December 2024. But let's give the economics another video. Just imagine for now paying that amount for giving PTSD for your children, while some parents can just do it for free. How stupid, right? Now, this information for me just reinforces this idea of how many professionals tend to use autism and so many other psychological disorders as a means to an end. That is, a way of capitalizing on people's anxiety, misinformed and preoccupied parents, or even just misbehaved children, by literally selling them problems or even creating these problems so they can treat these problems, so to speak. For today, I'll just say this. You probably don't have autism. You may have some difficulties in your life, but that doesn't mean you have a psychological disorder and that is innate and just likes you not to do the things you want to do in life. Just leave your home, go talk to people, buy my book on Amazon, stop listening to people on the internet, me included, subscribe to the channel, and you'll become a better person with that. Maybe. Who knows? Just listen to yourself and goodbye.